Two Worlds, One Family by Dragon Translator. Chapter 44. He will kill them. At first, Heather made no move, either to speak or to run. Hiccup suspected Astrid's grip upon her wrist kept the teen in place. For several heartbeats, there was silence. Then Heather's shoulders slumped and she sighed. Alvin wants it. You're an outcast? Astrid growled, shifting to stand right in front of the teen and leaning forward into her face. What? No! Alvin has my parents! He boarded our fishing ship, took them and the helmsman. She leaned right to stare at Hiccup, as if to will him into believing her. He said I had to get you to like me, to help me, to teach me about the dragons. Then I had to get the book, or he'd kill them. You've lied before, Astrid said. What makes you think we should believe you now? Hiccup, please, Heather said, seeming to ignore Astrid. He'll kill them. Hiccup's eyes narrowed. Astrid asked you a question, he said, his tone clipped and ice. Heather sighed, looking down at the grass. He told me to tell you it was pirates. He said Stoic would allow me to stay here with you. Then I could get you to like me and teach me about dragons. I was to take the book and steal an already trained dragon so he could have both. As if any dragon would allow you on their back, Toothless said, eyes slits and teeth bared. Heather recoiled, staring at Toothless as if he would attack her. Hiccup's brow furrowed, his gaze flicking up to the ring of dragons and Vikings beyond it. Gobber, you and Flammer take her to the jails, Hiccup said. Heather jerked, not breaking Astrid's hold. No, he'll kill them. Please, let me take the book. Let me take a dragon. You have so many, you won't miss one. Please, let me go. I have to save them. Gyda stepped forward and placed a hand atop Heather's head. Heather froze. Hiccup frowned, but Gyda shook her head. Go with Gobber and Flemmer, Heather, she said softly, her tone affecting a strange pitch. Everything is okay. You are safe. Your parents are safe. Heather blinked, relaxing. She looked over her shoulder at Gyda. You believe me? She asked softly. Do as Hiccup ordered, young one, Gyda said in answer, her tone still holding the same odd pitch. Gobber and Flemmer made their way up the hill. The dragons in the outer circle shifted to let them by, but closed right after. Heather offered no protest as Flemmer took the bag and then gripped her arm. Astrid let Heather's wrist go. Flemmer and Gobber bracketed Heather in between them. They headed to the Great Hall steps. The jail door lay beyond them, with cells carved out of the stone under the hall. The outer circle once again shifted to let them past, but closed to let no one else in. Hiccup looked from the dragons over to Gyda. He noted Astrid staring at the mage, jaw tight and an unreadable expression upon her face. Gyda? Hiccup asked. The mage took a deep breath. She was willing to cooperate, so long as she believed she could convince you her story was true. Once you ordered she be taken to jail, that cooperation went out of the window like bathwater. Hiccup frowned at the odd phrasing, but did not question it. The future would undoubtedly do Wash Day differently. Everything else was different about that place. Hiccup still remembered the small bard device Shadowfire danced and sang to. Did you put a mind spell on her? Tuff asked. And can you put one on Tuff? Ruff asked at the same time. Gyda stared at the two, frowning. No and no. Gyda looked back to Hiccup. When Shadowfire was younger, a thunderstorm would shake the pines outside of our cave. I learned to pitch my voice like that. Placing my hand on his head and speaking softly and slowly in that pitch would calm him. I tried it on Heather, because Astrid's grip or not, Heather would have fought. Someone would have ended up hurt. I acted to prevent that. Are her parents in danger? Hiccup asked. Did Alvin take them like she said? Gyda's nostrils flared as she took another deep breath. A pained expression crossed her face before she looked down and nodded her head. Hiccup heard Astrid hissed. and glanced at her to find her hands fisted at her side and her jaw clenched tighter. He reached over and placed a hand upon her upper arm. She looked at him, but her face did not clear this time, nor did her hands relax. She looked over at Gyda. She said Stoic would have let her stay with Hiccup, Astrid whispered, her voice steel. He did in the tale I know, Gyda returned in a whisper. Hiccup grunted. That is highly inappropriate, he said, arms crossed over his chest. I'm the heir. Only family can stay in that house with Dad and I. Beyond that, she's not Astrid. Gyda tilted her head. You and Astrid were not courting at this point in the tale I know, Hiccup. It doesn't matter, Hiccup said firmly. That girl is not Astrid. So, what now? Fishleg said in the silence that fell. Astrid stood straighter. We give Alvin what he wants, she said. We give him the book. Hiccup's head whipped left faster than a dragon's tail when it was fighting on the ground. She stared at him. Her parents are being used as a tool, Hiccup. Alvin can't get away with that. Astrid, Hiccup began in a whisper. He had a suspicion he knew what Astrid was planning. Everything within him froze. Astrid stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him. Sharpshot squawked and dropped onto Toothless's saddle. Hiccup's arms grasped her, yanking her into his chest. Feelings, different but annoyingly similar to earlier, threatened to drown him. What? Snotlout asked. Astrid and Heather could pass for each other if her hair was coloured with charcoal, Fishleg said. Hiccup's teeth clenched, keeping their hiss in his throat. He hated that Fishlegs gave voice to what Astrid wanted to do. It made it real. It made it palatable. It made it something they had to discuss and decide upon. None of which he wanted. He wanted her safe, in his arms. He knew he could not stifle her, though. She was a trained warrior, and out of her or rough, he trusted her more to keep her focus on the mission. Hiccup, Gyda said. I can accompany her. Hiccup blinked, then stared at Gyda. The mage smiled, and an understanding gleam appeared in her eyes. I will go if you wish it, my lord, she said softly. My life as payment if your intended returns harmed. Hiccup did his then. I don't want anyone to die, he said, pulling Astrid closer. He could not let go. His arms would not listen. His mind would not order it. His soul screeched at him to never release Astrid from his embrace. Gyda smiled again. I know, Hiccup. Hiccup sighed. Guys, I need to talk with Astrid, he said, looking around. Gyda bowed, moving past Fishlegs to her son, who stood next to Lawkeeper. She glanced back over her shoulder. Guys, she called. Come here. Now. Hiccup watched as each teen jerked and moved to Gyda's side. She tipped her head and then pointed to a spot near her son. Everyone, wait here while Astrid and Hiccup talk. None of the teens seemed inclined to argue. They all sat down, the dragons moving over to curl around each one. Gyda sat down by Shadowfire's foreleg and bowed her head. Hiccup looked over as Lawkeeper moved closer and bowed to him. Alpha, we can leave if you wish, or remain and keep everyone away while you speak to your intended, the Nightmare Elder said. Hiccup looked over at the Vikings still lingering in the plaza. He frowned. Back to work, please, he called down to the hill. Winter prep is still our top priority right now. He kept his jaw from dropping when none of the Vikings grumbled in protest. Everyone in the plaza turned and went back to what they were doing. Tall Gear and Firestorm hesitated at the bottom of the stairs until Edith placed a hand on his shoulder and gestured for him and the Nightmare to follow her. He did so, with one last look at his sister. Hiccup felt his insides clench and he tightened his grip upon Astrid, fearful of the thought that ran through his mind. This would not be the last time Tall Gear ever saw his sister. This would not be the last time Hiccup ever got to hold her in his arms. He would not allow that. He turned to Lawkeeper. desperate for something to take his mind off the danger Astrid's proposal put her in. I don't want to inconvenience any of the dragons if they are doing something to prep for winter themselves, he said, but I would welcome the barrier against anyone who wishes to eavesdrop. Lawkeeper bowed. As you wish, Arthur, he said before curling his neck and crooning something to the non-bonded dragons. Hiccup stared wide-eyed as each dragon laid down to where they stood or sat. None flew off. None looked willing to leave at any point. Lawkeeper turned back to Hiccup. Your nest understands that this is an important discussion, Arthur. We will keep any who should not be here out of it. With that, Lawkeeper bowed and moved back to his spot with the other elders. Shadowfire laid down carefully. Gita shifted slightly, then leaned back against his leg once more. The other teens and their dragons did not move. Hiccup turned to Astrid. Let's go inside, he whispered. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. So, yeah, bit dramatic. I like how Hiccup made her answer Astrid's question so that Astrid would not be ignored. You go, Alpha, show your future queen's strength. And that the dragons are so willing, like, you do not mess with this nest. Even one of them, they'll all come flying. I love that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and albino pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.